What's up, everybody? Welcome in episode 101 of the Man in the Cage MMA and Combat Sports podcast. It is fight day, so we're just a matter of, a handful of hours away or so from UFC 264 kicking off. Going to go over that card on episode 101 today. Decided to go live with it as I had episode 100, a special edition of the podcast, come out a couple days ago. MMA and Wine Pairings. Go check it out still. MMA and Wine Pairings with my good friend and sommelier, Mark Anthony. We paired some wines with UFC 264. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. And that's up right now as well. But episode 101 here, going to go over all of UFC 264, pretty much the main card, the main event and the co-main event, but also going to go over some of the other fights on this card coming up tonight. So that's what you have to look forward to on episode 101. As always, you can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Man in the Cage Pod. You can also go to the website, maninthecagemmma.show. That's the podcast website. You can get everything up there. And then make sure, I know some of you are already, of course, on the YouTube channel here, but go subscribe to the YouTube channel, Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast, and then go follow and subscribe as well on all the audio platforms, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, guys. Go check that out right now. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, all that stuff on any of these YouTube lives, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. And there'll be people I know joining here and there throughout today's episode. So feel free to do that. All right, let's get into it, though. UFC 264. You have the main event, of course, tonight. Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor, the trilogy fight. I don't want to say really the only fight, of course, everybody's looking forward to, as there's many fights people are looking forward to tonight. But, that is the headliner. That is mostly what everybody's going to be looking forward to. That's mostly what everybody's wondering going into UFC 264, who's going to take the trilogy fight here. You had Conor McGregor with the early knockout in the first matchup between these two way back in the day. And then the second time around, I think a lot of people maybe expected Conor McGregor to, I don't want to say win easily, but win again. And then, of course, things weren't easy for him, and he had a lot of issues with Dustin Poirier. I talked about that even with my guy Jason Glove Talk on his channel. Go follow him on Twitter at Glove_Talk. There's a video up right now, some more breakdowns of that fight as well. And I went through some of those things, and I'll go through some of those things again today that I think Poirier and McGregor need to do, and then the prediction. But it's one of those things where I think a lot of people thought in that second fight, hey, McGregor's going to go out there again, do similar things to Dustin Poirier, but it didn't work out that way. And now we get the third trilogy fight here. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen tonight? The anticipation for this fight really brimming, really starting to percolate, and I can't wait for it tonight on UFC 264. But let's get into it again. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, going to go through what each man does well. I'm going to try to do similar things for Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson here, even though usually most of the time I just jump on and I'll go through the co-main event pretty simply, just a quick prediction and then some of the other fights. I'll try to do some of that with Gilbert Burns, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, because I do think it is a fantastic matchup as well. But Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, tail of the tape real quick. Both these men similar height. Conor McGregor a 2-inch reach advantage, but there's not much there. Both these guys very similar, and it's going to come down to what I'm about to talk about, what each does well and what each is going to try to do going into tonight's main event. All right, McGregor first. And this first point I'm going to talk about, it's something, what he does well. It's something he actually didn't do the first time around. The second time around. He did it the first time around in the first Poirier-McGregor fight. The second time, though, he did not do this. But that's fighting out of a karate stance. And I'm going to bring that up, too, because this is one of those things where it's a weird point to say somebody does that well when they didn't just do it. But I do think that'll be one of the keys tonight for Conor McGregor. I do think he should come out in more of a karate-like stance again. Now, that does not solve the leg kicks, and I'll get more into the leg kicks in a second, and I talked about that all week, that Conor McGregor needs to check those leg kicks if he's going to have any chance tonight, obviously. And the karate stance does not solve that. The karate stance, if anything, may worsen that. So it's another little weird point to say he needs to fight out of that karate stance, but it's what he does well, though. That allows his footwork and his movement to be very good, to be fantastic at times. The Jose Aldo fight, the 13-second knockout, he's in that karate stance. He's able to slide back and counterpunch. He's able to get those good footwork exchanges going, get that good movement going. And a lot of that's because of that karate stance that he fights out of. So most of the time, but he didn't do that the last time around. Conor McGregor came out, he was a little bit more square. He was a little bit more in a boxing stance, a little bit more of a traditional boxing stance. He needs to get back to that karate stance in this fight tonight versus Dustin Poirier so he can get some of that movement back, because his movement was not very good. The last time out versus Dustin Poirier, he was stuck in cement at times, and it really made him overextend his punches a lot. a lot of the times, and he was able to get countered sometimes by Dustin Poirier. So I think he should come out tonight. Something he does well, and I'm going to keep it on there that he should fight out of that karate stance. It's something that he does do well, and I do think it's something he's going to try to do more so tonight versus Dustin Poirier, or at least maybe somewhat of a hybrid karate stance, even if it's just, not that traditional square plant your feet boxing stance that Conor McGregor was fighting out of. He needs to get more into that karate stance again. It's what he does well. The dynamite left hand, we've seen it over the years, the straight left. He did catch Dustin Poirier the first time around a little bit with that left hand. Didn't put Poirier out, although there were times where maybe you could see stung him a little bit, especially to the body. He had a nice left hand to the body at one point in I believe it was the end of the first round in the second fight that kind of made Poirier mince a little bit. But we've seen that over the years. The dynamic left hand, it's what McGregor does well, needs to go to that again tonight. Good hand speed in general for the most part. I do think we need to see some more improved hand speed tonight compared to the second fight. And that'll be kind of the theme when I get to the prediction here, that it's really going to come down to, I think, this fight of what Conor McGregor shows up. And that may be a little bit of a cop-out, but it really does, I think, come down to that if a lot of the Conor McGregor we saw in the last fight comes into this fight versus Dustin Poirier, we might see a similar outcome in this fight. So we need to see that dynamic left hand. We need to see that hand speed in general come back for Conor McGregor. He needs to throw that jab more in general in this fight. Overall, he did a good job landing the jab in the second fight. That was one of the few bright spots I actually took away from that second fight versus Dustin Poirier, that his jab was successful, but he didn't throw it enough. He kind of abandoned it at one point too. It just went to just throwing significant strikes, significant punches, big power punches. He needs to throw that jab again. He needs to set that jab up for that left hand. Sets up his boxing combinations well with feints. When he goes to that, it's what he needs to do tonight again. And then something I want to see him do more in this fight. Even Dustin Poirier, who did a good job countering in the second fight, Conor McGregor, when he's pulled back and he's countering with his left hand, he does that pull back left straight counter. Very good punch for him, very good counter. And that's something where he did another little bright spot from the second fight. There wasn't many. He had a lot of things to improve upon, but that was one of them, that when Dustin Poirier did come forward and was the aggressor, he was catching Poirier pretty clean in that second fight. He was catching him pretty good on the chin. The chin just held up and he didn't get knocked out. And then the leg kicks added up, and then we know what happened in the second round, which I'll get more to the Poirier side of things in a second. But when Poirier did come forward, McGregor was able to be very successful with those counters. So I expect to see Conor McGregor maybe do some of that more tonight. When he's really, throwing his teep kick up the middle, his kicking game in general, I think that'll be another key for Conor McGregor. Talked about that earlier this week. Want to see more of the kicking game from Conor McGregor. I think the karate stance, the footwork will lead to that. We need to see some more of that to set up those boxing combinations, especially that teep kick up the middle. That little teep kick from Conor McGregor to the body could be a weapon tonight, that he could try to take some of the air out of Dustin Poirier, keep him at distance, manage the distance, not go for that kill shot right away, set up some things, don't burn your gas tank out too much, maybe take this fight deeper this time. Don't just expect to go get that nuclear shot on Dustin Poirier right away. Throw that teep kick to the middle, up the middle to the body, take some of the air at Dustin Poirier, early and often in this fight. Good vision in the pocket for the most part Conor McGregor has had in the past. He mixes things up well most of the time, and this is one of the big keys for me tonight. Another one, go into the body. He mixes things up to the head. He mixes things up to the body. He had some success again in the second fight versus Dustin Poirier going to the body. I want to see him do that more, though. It's like the jab. And that was a little bit of a story of the first fight, that the things Conor McGregor was doing well, he went away from them. The jab was working, went away from it. The body didn't go to it enough, even though he had some success going to the body. So I want to see him go back and mix things up again, mix up the target area, mix up the attack zones of where you're going to go on Dustin Poirier for Conor McGregor tonight. And then also for Conor McGregor, and then I'll get to some weaknesses in a second, then get to Dustin Poirier. When he starts to overwhelm you, he can really start to push you back and use all of his weapons. And a lot of that is, when you start to overwhelm someone like that, a lot of that is because you start going to the body. You start using your jab. You start mixing in all your punches. You start to overwhelm your opponent where, as an opponent, what do? You try to angle out. You try to footwork out. Well, if he uses his own footwork, if he's using that normal good movement that he has, he can cut off the octagon. He's going to overwhelm you. He's going to push you back against the cage. And that's when Conor McGregor is at his best, when he's doing that. So I want to see some of that tonight. And then, I also want to see some of that patient finisher again from Conor McGregor. We've seen in the past that he's not rushing the finish. The first Nate Diaz fight wasn't a patient finisher. Thought he was going to blow him out of there. Really hurt him. Second fight, he was more of the patient finisher. Now, he was in trouble a little bit at times in that fight, but we know what Nate Diaz is, right? We know what happened in that fight too, where Conor McGregor was able to take that fight deeper in and then eventually be able to win the fight by decision. But he was more that patient finisher in that second fight. And he needs to do that more in this fight again, where the second Poirier fight, the second Poirier fight versus McGregor, he was less of a patient finisher. And it wasn't that he was emptying the gas tank on one exchange, but you just had that sense that I think he thought he was going to blow him out of there pretty quickly. He needs to become more of that patient finisher. That way he can go deep into this fight. And I'm not saying he's going to get the finish. What I mean by patient finisher is just use that patience. If you see the finish, take it. Chip away to that finish. If it happens on one punch and you see the guy really get hurt, then go after it. But don't just rush it. If it's not there, don't try to push it. Don't try to push too hard if the finish isn't there. Be that patient finisher. And I think Conor McGregor will have some more success tonight. So overall, just Conor McGregor, mix up your game again. Mix up your game. Mix up your stance compared to that second fight. We did not see that much in the second fight. He needs to do that again tonight. Now, the weaknesses, some of these will, are just some things that you'll just check over the years. We already know Conor McGregor could be taken down. The takedown defense, not as bad, of course, as some fighters. I mean, he's an elite level fighter, has been a champion level, a prize fighting level caliber fighter is Conor McGregor. So, he doesn't have terrible takedown defense, but it's also not great, right? So he can be taken down. Something I think Poirier might even try more tonight is try to get some of those level changes. He can keep his hands low at times. I think that's also the issue he had in that second fight where, the leg was really getting beat up and the leg was starting to go out on him, and it led to that finish from Dustin Poirier in the second round. But a lot of the punches he was eating, he had his hands very low, and he has his hands very low in general, so he can get caught a little bit with that. He can cardio dump at times, of course. That's why he needs to be that patient finisher. You can grind him out if you have the right game plan, and that's what Dustin Poirier did in the second fight. And a lot of these are points I had going into the last fight too. So it's funny, then you saw Dustin Poirier do a lot of these things where he did grind him out of there, the clinch situations, the takedown, the not, chin. I know that sometimes you really can't project that you're going to have a great chin, but the chin held up and he was able to grind him out of there a little bit. So you can grind Conor McGregor out if you have the correct game plan of getting him up against the cage, shooting those takedowns, the leg kicks, just little things to chip away at Conor McGregor. You can grind him down pretty successfully at times. And then you can combo in straight punches on him because of the low, because of the way he holds his hands, because of how he will be confident in his counters. If you time him right, you can come in with some straight punches on Conor McGregor. So those are some weaknesses, some strengths going into today's fight versus Dustin Poirier. Now for Dustin Poirier, very clean technical boxing when he stays within himself, which is something he did pretty well for the most part in the second fight. Now, there were times where he would overthrow, wasn't staying within himself. That's the bad Dustin Poirier side of his boxing. But when he is within himself and using his jab and using his nice short right hook, using his straight punches, very clean technical boxing. And I said this earlier this week as well, that I don't think Dustin Poirier has the best boxing in mixed martial arts, but I think he does have some of the top boxing in mixed martial arts. If I had to go a top 5 list, I wouldn't put him near number 1, but I think he's up there, though. I think he's definitely up there when he stays within himself. And that's why he does match up very well if his chin's able to hold up and able to do some of the things he did in the second fight against a guy like Conor McGregor. Now, he has that nice straight left. I already mentioned that a little bit. Shoots his jab out there nicely, needs to keep using that. Right hook can be money when he's not overthrowing it. And, when he's not overthrowing that, he can really start to set up all of his other punches, that straight left with that right hook. He can set up his combinations very well. Then he has a nice kick to the body as well. He'll throw. He does throw some kicks, although he's not an overly, kicky type of guy. He does have a pretty decent kicking game, though. He'll throw a kick to the body, has some nice calf kicks, good leg kicks. That's going to be a key, big, massive key for tonight for him against Conor McGregor. Puts together, as I said, all those combinations. Already mentioned that. He'll grab underhooks at times and put you in that clinch. It's something I think he'll also look to do once again tonight. Had a lot of success in that second fight versus Conor McGregor with it. And while he's not a pure wrestler, he does have some good wrestling, though. He does have some good level changes. He'll put you on your back, and he'll go to work on the ground a little bit, chip away with some body shots. He'll chip away with some ground and pound to the head, and just start to control, get some of that, accrue some of that top control time on you, and start to control some of those rounds. So Dustin Poirier overall, and there's a couple more things, and I'll get to his weaknesses. Overall, though, Dustin Poirier, very solid fighter. And that's why this, Conor McGregor's got to make this a striking battle, because otherwise Dustin Poirier is probably the better complete mixed martial artist. It doesn't mean he's the better fighter. It doesn't mean that when Conor McGregor's on top of his game, Dustin Poirier is the better fighter. Just overall, though, his complete arsenal of things a little better than Conor McGregor, because he could do a little bit of everything, right? Now, again, it doesn't mean you're going to win. It doesn't mean you're a better fighter, but it does allow him certain instances, like the second fight, to be able to have the correct game plan to grind out a guy like Conor McGregor. Now, he also does a good job, Dustin Poirier, with his guard a lot of the times when he sees combinations coming. Now, this is his defensive striking. Get back to that a little bit. Specifically, his left hand. He does get his left hand up on the side of his face, so he does do a good job at sometimes in his guard when he's striking, protecting against some of your shots coming in. So Poirier, we're going to look to do that again. We're going to look to go to the leg kicks, look to get some of those level changes, the wrestling going, look to stay within himself with a lot of these boxing combinations, and look to do what he did the second fight out against Conor McGregor. Now, his weaknesses, his opponent's left hand and can go over his jab, right over his right shoulder can be a weakness. So when he's, let me word that a little better. I know that was a little confusing, but his opponent's left hand can go over. You can punch over him, right? You can counter over his shots. So when he's throwing on you, you can counter over his punches. And Conor McGregor did do that a little bit in the second fight as well. You'll notice that, I believe it was the first round, there was a nice shot that landed on Poirier that pushed him back a little bit. And it was Poirier coming in with his own punches. And McGregor was able to throw his punches over the top of Dustin Poirier's punches and able to counter him a little bit. So some Poirier's got to watch in this fight going in there. Sometimes he'll have trouble circling off the cage with the footwork. The second fight, he didn't, though. He actually used it to his advantage. I actually thought he had the better footwork in the fight. That's why McGregor, for him, it's going to be key of using that footwork better in this one, because you can, at times, push Poirier up against the cage. You'll have trouble circling off with that footwork. So I think that'll be a key, or at least a key for McGregor, a weakness for Poirier in this fight, that he's once again going to have to try to use some better footwork. Otherwise, he could get caught up against the cage there. He can get a little wild at times with his punches. I talked about the overthrowing. I don't know why he does that sometimes. Everybody wants to see the highlight knockout, but how many times do you see an overthrow actually knock somebody out? You know what I mean? How many times do you see a complete haymaker knock somebody out? Not very often. So, I mean, I don't know why he does this sometimes. I know it's a little bit of a different look. He actually does a good job bobbing and weaving in these exchanges where he will start to overthrow with his hooks and his punches. But he just needs to stay within himself, though. He can't go back to a lot of that. He can't go back to throwing wildly like that, where he's going to leave himself open, and it's not going to be very successful with it. You're wasting seconds, you're wasting minutes, you're wasting a little bit of energy when he does that. And then also, the last little weakness for Dustin Poirier, and there's some other ones, but the last one I would really point out is he does keep his chin a little high, and he does keep his head on the center line a little too much at times. And again, the second fight, he was caught here and there. We know what happened in the first fight between McGregor and Poirier. He was caught behind the ear. But his head is there; it's on the center line, and his chin's a little high at times. Mostly he tries to tuck it, but it will get a little high, so he will expose that chin to be caught. So he's got to watch those things tonight, because Conor McGregor at any time with that left hand, or at least you would perceive it going into this fight that any time Conor McGregor can knock him out with that left hand or any of his boxing combinations or even kicks. I mean, if Conor McGregor uses his kicks again, we've seen how deadly he can be with those when he's on top of his game. So those are strengths and weaknesses of both guys. My prediction real quick, though, and then I'll get to the co-main event, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Gilbert Burns. But my prediction for this fight, and I'm going to read off before I get into this fight's prediction, what I had wrote, because I still had my notes for the second fight between Poirier and McGregor. I'm going to read you off real quick how I predicted that last fight, and then I'm going to match it up to what I'm going to say today, okay? And it may not be exact here, word for word, and you'll get my official prediction for this fight in a second, but here's the second one that I had. I wrote, McGregor has been and still can be a great fighter. McGregor, in my opinion, will either catch Poirier walking in with the counter left, or he will set up the left hand as he wears down Poirier to the point where there's no escape with his back against the cage for Poirier. So the second fight, I thought McGregor was going to knock him out. Now, that's not shocking. That's not controversial. A lot of people had that prediction that Conor McGregor was going to knock him out. The deal was, though, is that Conor McGregor's didn't look that good. And the things he was doing successfully, he went away from them in that second fight. And he also didn't look to be that Conor McGregor standard of a fighter. His footwork, he was stuck in the mud at times, stuck in quicksand, overextending himself on a lot of punches, eating a ton of leg kicks. Was not checking them until later on in the fight. And that made that fight a little bit different, in my opinion. So I think that is the simple prediction here for this next one, the trilogy fight coming up tonight in UFC 264. That if the great Conor McGregor shows up in this fight, I do think he beats Dustin Poirier. And there's a lot of people out there picking Poirier in this fight, and I can't blame them. Okay. And Poirier is a very, very good fighter, maybe even a borderline great fighter as well, especially when he's on top of his game and he's using all of these things. But if the real Conor McGregor shows up, it's the old Eminem song, The Real Slim Shady. If the real Conor McGregor shows up tonight, I'd still have to take him. I still think he beats Dustin Poirier. Now, does he have to make adjustments? Yes. Are there things he has to do differently in this fight? Yes, but I think a lot of that is being the old Conor McGregor, which means being mentally there, being mentally tough, being on top of everything, having the correct game plan, using the correct footwork, checking leg kicks, all those things. If the real Conor McGregor shows up, I think he beats Dustin Poirier in this fight. But if he doesn't, Dustin Poirier, I think, blows him out of there again. Because Dustin Poirier, again, very, very good fighter, borderline great fighter. If McGregor doesn't show up and he doesn't approve and make adjustments on all these things, it's going to be another night for Poirier. But I'm going to take McGregor again here, though, because he is, historically, not that he's had a ton of rematches, but historically, actually, he's been pretty good in rematches. And I know this technically is the trilogy fight, so he's already had the rematch. But I still think that this is more of that rematch scenario, though. The first fight, I kind of throw that out the window, actually, a little bit. Everyone brings up the trilogy here. I think you have to throw that first fight out the window a little bit. Poirier had, I believe, something like 10 fights in the UFC. I know he had already been, he already had a good career in WEC. He already had somewhat of a career in the UFC. Both these guys are different now. Poirier's a different fighter. And Conor McGregor's a way different fighter, too. Conor McGregor over the years, he's had the success now. He's won the belts after that first McGregor-Poirier fight. And then you had this fight, the second fight. So I consider this more of the rematch. And I think McGregor is going to come in. I think he's going to try to make some of those adjustments in this fight. Now, is it going to be an easy fight for him when I'm predicting this victory? No, I actually think it's going to be either a late knockout or a decision win for McGregor if he wants to win this one. I don't think he necessarily goes in there and blows out Dustin Poirier again. That's why I think he's got to be patient. I think he's got to check those leg kicks. Got to play a long game here. Play the long game of 5 rounds here. If you see the finish, go find it. If not, though, play the long game. Otherwise, Dustin Poirier could eat you up a little bit again here and get you out of there. So I think it's going to be a tough fight tonight. I think it's going to be somewhat of a longer fight than the first two fights between these two men. I do think it might get into that third round. Not saying we don't see a finish at some point, but I do think Conor McGregor's going to have to play a little bit more a long game tonight. So I'm going to take Conor McGregor. I still think what I wrote for that second fight still stands true. I still think it rings true. I think that I saw enough, and I think, honestly, Conor McGregor is being overlooked a little bit in this fight, and I understand why. I understand that, all the time he's taken off. I understand his last win, in the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, right, in mixed martial arts is Donald Cerrone. I understand that he hasn't had a ton of success in the last few years or so, and I understand that he took some time off, and I know that maybe we don't see the elite level Conor McGregor, but even if he shows up at a somewhat elite level or somewhat great level still, I still think he's better than Dustin Poirier. I still think he's the more dangerous fighter, and I still think he has the ability to get the job done here. But it's going to be a hard fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Poirier takes rounds here. We'll see. I mean, I think it might come down to a round or two if it does go to decision. It's going to be a very tough fight here. Poirier is a tough cookie, and McGregor's going to have to do some things in this matchup if he wants to get his hand raised. It's not going to be an easy walk in the park like I think he thought it was. Again, that second fight out, I think he thought it was going to be a little bit of a walk in the park. I think that's why, too, he was so nice to Poirier. He was going with that nice McGregor persona that he had in the Donald Cerrone fight. Then he had it in the last Poirier fight. I think he thought, again, he's just going to walk through him. And then everybody would love that, oh, Conor's all humble now and he's beating everybody. I think that's why he's going a little bit more now to the, old mean Conor McGregor here. So I'm going to take McGregor tonight by late knockout or by decision. But this is going to be an interesting fight. And if McGregor doesn't show up, if he doesn't show up to his elite level here, and he shows up slow again, the hand speed, I think it's got to be better tonight. That doesn't show up. If the footwork doesn't improve, if he doesn't make some of these small adjustments here, I do think it could be a long night for him or a short night, no matter how you want to look at it, against Dustin Poirier. But I saw enough little things in that second fight, enough little things that I think if he does more of those, just some here and there, I do think he beats Dustin Poirier tonight. So I'll go Conor McGregor by late knockout or decision, but should be a great fight. Let me know on Twitter and on Instagram. And again, if you're on the chat right now, YouTube Live, leave your comments and questions for me. I'll try to get to them, but tweet at me or post something on Instagram at Man in the Cage Pod on both of those platforms. All right, let's get to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Gilbert Burns real quick. I'm going to try to fly through these a little quicker as I'm already a good almost half hour into the YouTube Live here. Going to try to make this about 30 minutes or so and get out of here. But the co-main event tonight, a very good one as well. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Gilbert Burns. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, what he does well, speaking of karate stances, one of the best karate stances in all of mixed martial arts. He fights out of that karate stance. He's great at sliding in and out of the pocket, closing the distance, and managing the distance. That's what makes Stephen Wonderboy Thompson such a tough egg to crack, that he does manage the distance in a fight. He manages distance better than really, I think, any striker in all of mixed martial arts right now. Anyone in boxing, anybody. It's because of that karate stance, because he slides in and out of the pocket so well, and he keeps you at bay, and he'll use all of his weapons. He uses that sidekick very well. His sidekick is so good, and he uses it as a weapon to take some of the air out of you. For karate guys out there, obviously karate tournaments, a lot of them are point-based tournaments. To score points with that sidekick, even though it is still a mixed martial arts contest here, he uses that though to, still score strikes on you, score those strikes, take some of the air out of you, manage distance with it. It's almost like he uses that as a jab too, with that sidekick, that he is able to use it and then get out of the pocket, or keep you at bay, and then be able to do some of his other combinations, use some of his other weapons within that karate stance with all of his karate tools. Switches stances very well between orthodox and southpaw, very fluid. Throws kicks out of both stances very efficiently. That's most karate guys, but especially for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, phenomenal kicking game. Mentioned that a little bit, the sidekick, and helping that to help maintain distance. Smooth left cross when he's out of his southpaw stance is something. When he does go to southpaw, he'll throw a little bit more. He does throw that smooth left cross times as well, and he'll also move his head well with it. So good technique overall on that. Pretty good counter puncher because of that point-based system a little bit of fighting out of that karate stance, that when you come in on him, he's very comfortable, going backwards, punching backwards. He's very comfortable going left or right or moving forward. So when you come forward on him, he's very comfortable slipping out of the way and counterpunching on you. So it's not as easy as just walking him down. You do have to time him. You do have to set things up, and it has to be a little more complex in order to beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, because of every tool he has within that karate kicking game and that karate stance that he uses with all that footwork. And then last, strength for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, then a few weaknesses, get to Gilbert Burns. At times, not at times, but what I really like to see from, what I really love to see from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson recently is he's shown more of a killer instinct off. And I thought that was missing a little bit from his game at times, where times with Tyron Woodley, no, but other times in the Tyron Woodley fights, yes, similarly, that he didn't really show that true killer instinct on guys. It was just very, hey, you know what, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use my straight, my left cross here. I'm going to use my kicking game. But he didn't really have that attacking mentality, that killer instinct, that when you have your opponent confused and you have your opponent, really in all disarray, and you're really scoring on him, go for the kill. And that's what Stephen Wonderboy Thompson did. 2 Novembers ago against Vicente Luque. He went after him. He went after him, and he showed that killer instinct against Vicente Luque, who is also a Henry Hooft guy. Gilbert Burns, a Henry Hooft guy. And he showed that killer instinct off against him, did Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And I like to see that from him. If you're going to go out there and really confuse people and not allow people to get on the inside of you and use all your karate, all your karate striking, all that stuff, and go for the killer, go for the kill, go for that knockout, go for that finish, or at least put your opponent in a little bit of trouble. Don't just let him be comfortable at distance. Close the distance sometimes and try to put him away. So I like that from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson recently with all of his tools that I just mentioned. The weaknesses, though, he does keep his hands a little low. Head movement is an issue if you cut off the octagon. It's all about proper footwork. When you're fighting a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson that wants to manage distance, wants to stay at distance, and then only get in the pocket when he wants to, if you cut off the footwork on him, which you want to do, that's going to be the game for Gilbert Burns. He's got to cut him off. He's got to cut off the octagon. He's going to have to get in that phone booth with him, which he doesn't really want to fight in. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson doesn't want to fight in a phone booth necessarily. But when he does do that, his chin can get a little high. His head movement in general gets a little off there. So for Gilbert Burns, that's going to be the key for him, is to cut off the octagon, try to manage the distance yourself, try to close the distance, try to break some windows, get on the inside as a little bit of a smaller fighter here and break some windows, as the great Teddy Atlas always says. Heavy lead leg, so you can leg kick him. I think that'll be another weapon for Gilbert Burns here. He's got to go after that leg. His boxing at times can be somewhat suspect. The kicking game is great. The over karate game is great, but his actual boxing, his actual hands, that always not the best. Now, he has some tools here and there that he'll show off, and it's not that you can disrespect his boxing, but a little suspect at times, at best, for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And then this kind of leads this last point, this last weakness kind of leads into that a little bit. Is I think he's actually better with his hands. I think he's better with his boxing combinations out of his southpaw stance. When he's in orthodox, his right hand, not the best, not very straight. It's a little loopy at times. So I like his boxing a little better out of that southpaw stance. So when he's in orthodox, I want to see him just throwing kicks, because you can throw kicks and then change stances real quick and then use some more boxing combinations, use some of the more of that kicking game out of that orthodox, or excuse me, out of that southpaw stance, switch stances, that type of thing against Gilbert Burns here. All right, now what Gilbert Burns does well, he's made huge strides with his striking. Henry Hooft, one of my favorite, I say it every single podcast episode, one of my favorite coaches in all of mixed martial arts, one of my favorite striking coaches in all of mixed martial arts. He's helped make Burns a dangerous striker. He's added a lot of weapons to Gilbert Burns, and it's got him to this point. He got the title shot against Kamaru Usman. I know I don't want to say he got destroyed, because he actually had Kamaru Usman in a little bit of trouble in that first round, had him hurt a little bit. But after that, it was all Kamaru Usman. But still, Gilbert Burns, what he's been able to do with Henry Hooft with that striking, has got him to this point where he's a dangerous fighter now, and he's going to be a dangerous opponent for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in this fight. Now, not all the time, and this is some of the striking tools that Gilbert Burns has acquired over the years with Henry Hooft here, even as a jiu-jitsu guy, but not all the time. But he uses nice angles, nice entry points with a lot of his striking combinations. Gilbert Burns does good kicks to the legs and body, okay to the head. He's not really a guy who's going to throw a lot of kicks to the head, but kind of Muay Thai-esque, a lot of his Muay Thai. He's going to throw a lot of great leg kicks. He's going to throw a lot of good kicks to the body, good takedowns at times. He'll show off for wrestling. Great ground game, of course, slick grappling when he gets you there, being a jiu-jitsu champion. Phenomenal left hook on the feet. And right hook, too. His punching game, his left and his right hook in general, very dangerous now, and he sets it up very, very well. So that phenomenal left hook, the phenomenal right hook that he throws now out of both stances. Out of his southpaw stance, very, very good. It allows him to protect himself with a lot of these hooks too, where he'll use his shoulder and he'll roll into it a little bit, where it's hard to catch him on the way in. It's a very strong and quick punch for Gilbert Burns. Decent combos with all of his boxing. His jab, his feints have improved over the years. It's developed since the Dan Hooker loss. The Dan Hooker fight is a prime example of a fighter losing and then improving, making adjustments, getting better overall with your overall game. And that was that Dan Hooker fight. And after that fight, you can see him in a lot of his matchups after that, developed the jab, developed feints. You can tell Henry Hooft said, hey, man, you can't just be walking in, right? You can't be walking in without a jab. You can't be walking in without feints, just throwing big bombs. Guys are going to catch you. So he's developed some of that, and it's allowed him to be a better striker as well. And then, when he does get taken down, I don't think that'll be this. I don't think Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is going to go too much wrestling heavy in this fight. Obviously, I don't think he wants to be on the ground with a guy like Gilbert Burns when your strength is striking. That's where Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is going to want to keep this fight. But we've seen other matchups that when he does get taken down, his ground prowess does allow Gilbert Burns to be fine off his back, to try to sweep, try to get submissions off of his back. So overall, pretty dangerous fighter now is Gilbert Burns, even though he's coming off of a loss here. Weaknesses, when pressure, he tends to back up against the cage in a linear line. He tends to just back up straight against the cage. His chin can get caught a little up in the air at times. In the past, when he's throwing combinations, he got caught a little bit of that in the fight with Kamaru Usman. He's striking in the past, no jab, no feints. And from time to time, you can still see him go back to the old Gilbert Burns, where maybe he comes in a little too aggressive, a little too just eager just to throw big bombs instead of setting up his jab, setting up a lot of his boxing, his Muay Thai with a lot of feints. So that can happen from time to time, even though I think he has improved upon that a lot over his career, though. Some of his footwork in the past, a little bit off. Naked striking at times with his kicks and punches, where he will just, he won't set it up again. He will just throw that leg kick. Similar with that chin, can get a little. The wrestling game, again, I don't think it's going to be really play too much into this, where he's going to have to worry about takedown defense in this matchup. I could be wrong. Maybe Stephen Wonderboy Thompson tries to level change here and there, but I think it's going to be primarily a striking game plan, of course, for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. All right, so those are strengths and weaknesses of both guys. Let's get into, though, my prediction for this fight now. Now, I mentioned it a little bit, but Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a little bit taller than Gilbert Burns. He's 6 feet tall. Gilbert Burns is 5'10". He's also going to have a 4-inch reach advantage on Gilbert Burns, 75 inches to 71 inches. This is one of those matchups that I really think it's going to be interesting to see how Gilbert Burns closes the distance and what game plan Henry Hooft has here. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson had a lot of success against Vicente Luque in their matchup. Another Henry Hooft here, guy here in Gilbert Burns. So both these camps have prepared a little bit for each other's camps, right? I mean, Henry Hooft camp, a fighter has prepared for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is prepared for a Henry Hooft fighter. Now you get this here. So what's strategically, and that's what I'm excited to see in this matchup, strategically, what camp, what coach comes out with a different game plan, what adjustments are going to be made. What does Henry Hooft tell Gilbert Burns in this matchup to do that Vicente Luque did not do against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson? Because I think Vicente Luque's got some of the better striking in all mixed martial arts too, and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson looked phenomenal against him. And that's why I'm going to pick Stephen Wonderboy Thompson here. I think he probably outpoints him. I think it probably goes to decision. I don't rule out a knockout, as Gilbert Burns just got knocked out. He has been knocked out before in the past. I could see him getting aggressive in this fight. I could see him catching something big from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But I think overall, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is just so good. I mean, at managing distance. Because I think Gilbert Burns is very good as well. But this is just a tough matchup for Gilbert Burns. He's got to try to get some of his wrestling going here. I think he's got to try to get some of his jiu-jitsu going. I think he's got to try to take some of the air, some of the, if you will, the energy out of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's legs. I think he's got to make him, not move as well in this fight. I think he's got to go to the legs. So chop at that leg with that calf kick out of that karate stance, and then try to make him expel some energy with some takedowns and some jiu-jitsu. And I think he can exploit him a little bit on the ground maybe, but just make Stephen Wonderboy Thompson be a little slower, because when they are striking, I think Stephen Thompson's going to have most of the success 90% of the time, controlling distance, staying at distance, and just outpointing him there, or finding that big shot on a counter to knock out Gilbert Burns. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a lot of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson dictating the striking exchanges. So Gilbert Burns got to find a way to cut off the octagon. He's got to find a way to get on the inside. And then with Wonderboy Thompson keeping his hands a little low, he's got to throw those big hooks. He's got to throw that big hook over the top, that big left hook from Gilbert Burns. If he switches stances to southpaw, throw that big right hook. He's got to do some of that here against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So he's going to have to cut off the octagon. He's going to have to use some different footwork here in order to wear down Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think he's going to have to take some of the energy out of him. I just don't know if that's going to happen, though. Stephen Thompson, again, one of the toughest eggs to crack in all of mixed martial arts. One of the toughest eggs to crack in all of combat sports, in my opinion, because of the karate background. And it's not even just that he has a karate background. We've seen, Michelle Watterson. We've seen other fighters with a karate background not have success. It's the way Stephen Wonderboy Thompson doesn't. He's also athletic. He also, is very explosive with a lot of the things he does. I think he's going to be able to manage distance here. I think he's going to be able to pick apart Gilbert Burns from distance and outpoint him. Again, don't rule out the knockout from Thompson, but I do think he's going to stay at distance, and I think he's going to be able to outpoint Gilbert Burns here. But Burns is one of those guys where he's always a plus 135 underdog like he is in this fight. He's always a plus 115 underdog almost, it seems, every fight. And somehow he goes out there and beats fighters still. He's been an underdog a lot of his career because, and obviously the jiu-jitsu is great, but because he's had to catch up. He's had to become a striker, right? He's had to do some of these things. He's been an underdog a lot of his career, has Gilbert Burns. Not every matchup, of course, but a lot of matchups, especially these high-end matchups. He's been an underdog in a lot of these fights. He's been able to win a lot of these fights. So Gilbert Burns winning this fight, doing something crazy is not out of the question. But I think Stephen Thompson, a little too tricky for Gilbert Burns in this fight. So I'm going to take Stephen Thompson by decision in this one. All right, the rest of the main card, Tai Tuivasa taking on Greg Hardy, Irene Aldana taking on Yana Kunitskaya, Sean O'Malley taking on Chris Motino. I'm going to run through these, and I'll run through the rest of the card as well. And then I spent a little time on both of those in the main event and co-main event. I have Tai Tuivasa in this one. I'm tempted to take Greg Hardy, even after he's had cardio issues, even after he's coming off of a knockout loss to Marcin Tybura. I'm tempted to take Greg Hardy here, as I do like Greg Hardy's jab. I do like his footwork. I do think it's something that might give Tai Tuivasa some issues, especially early in this fight. But the gas tank of Greg Hardy, I don't trust it here against a guy like Tuivasa who's going to pressure you, and he's going to try to make this a dogfight. Tuivasa is. He doesn't want this to be a Volkov. And I know Greg Hardy made it to the bell in that fight, even though he lost against Alexander Volkov. But Volkov made that a pure, distant striking battle that if I land something big, I'll land something big. But I'm not going to press you. I'm not going to try to, make you expel more energy. I just know I'm the better, rangier fighter, and I don't think you're that good or as good as I am. I'm going to stay at range, and I'm going to pick you apart there. Tai Tuivasa is going to try to get on the inside here. He's going to try to, because I believe he's actually this somewhat smaller fighter a little bit. Yeah, he's going to have a 5.5-inch reach disadvantage. He's going to have a 3-inch height disadvantage. So he's going to be the smaller fighter here, but I think he is going to try to get on the inside here, obviously, make Greg Hardy work. Now, first round, again, I think Greg Hardy's going to win round 1 tonight. I think he's going to use his jab that's been very good stiff jab he's improved on, or not improved on. He gained it over the years when he first got into mixed martial arts. He's had that nice jab. I think he's going to use that tonight. I think round 1, I think his footwork will be all there. I think the cardio in round 1 hasn't been an issue. So Greg Hardy's going to try to probably catch him in round 1. If not, I think he wins round 1. But after that, that's where it gets kind of murky. That I do think Tai Tuivasa getting on the inside, making him work, making him expel energy will allow Tai Tuivasa to grind out Greg Hardy's cardio. And then when Hardy's mouth's open, and he can't go to the sideline. This isn't the NFL. This isn't the NFL. This isn't second down or third down. You're off the field. The offense is on the field. No, Tai Tuivasa is going to be in your face for the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes or however long the fight lasts. He's going to stay in his face, and I think he's going to expel more cardio there. What'll be interesting in this matchup, though, is Tai Tuivasa does a lot of his finishes, a lot of his knockouts, and he has an over 90% knockout rate, have come in the first round. So here you have Greg Hardy, who the cardio is not an issue in the first round. He hasn't had issues in the first round versus a guy in Tai Tuivasa who has a lot of success in the first round. So something's got to give there. I do think it'll be Hardy having a successful first round, actually. But after that, I do think Tai Tuivasa then takes over a little bit. So the trend would say, whoever wins, whatever happens in the first round here is going to win the fight, right? If Greg Hardy does well in the first round, he's going to win the fight. If Tai Tuivasa knocks him out, obviously he's going to win the fight. Obviously, or if he has the better first round, he's going to win the fight. I think that trend changes a little bit here, though, that I do think Greg Hardy gets grinded down. I do think the cardio starts to get expelled a little bit in those later rounds, and I think Tai Tuivasa finds a knockout. I think he will knock out Greg Hardy eventually in this fight. Wouldn't be surprised if it's in the third round, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it's in the second round. Heck, I mean, he could catch him in the first round. Tai Tuivasa is a dangerous fighter, dangerous heavyweight, and I think he's going to have success again tonight versus Greg Hardy. Attempting to take Greg Hardy, but until he proves his cardio, until he shows off some other facets of his game, being able to fight a full 15 minutes with all of your tools, you can't pick him right now. I just seen that, and I know Marcin Tybura, I know he's a pretty, we've seen it even in his career right now. He's become a very dangerous heavyweight himself. Same thing with Alexander Volkov. Greg Hardy's been taking on some of these guys. But I think Tai Tuivasa is getting up there too, where I do think he's a dangerous heavyweight as well. So I'll take Tai Tuivasa here by knockout in the second or third round versus Greg Hardy. Aldana versus Yana Kunitskaya. I'm actually going to take Kunitskaya here. Now, Aldana did come in overweight yesterday. She did come in, 3.5 pounds overweight. Ridiculous. I think she's doing that because she knows Yana Kunitskaya is going to want to come in here, try to grind her down a little bit. She's going to try to get her up against the cage in the clinch. She's going to try to use her wrestling. She's going to try to use all of her tools in this fight. And that's what Yana Kunitskaya always does. Kunitskaya doesn't do anything particularly great, but she's really, and I'm not saying she's even Dustin Poirier, because I actually think Poirier, in the main event has the better, I think he's a better fighter than someone like Yana Kunitskaya, but Kunitskaya does have a good enough skill set, though, where she can grind you down. She can use all of her tools, and I think she's going to do that tonight versus Irene Aldana and try to stay away from a lot of those striking exchanges, because Aldana, when she's using her hands, the slick boxing she has, she can be very dangerous. But Kunitskaya, I think she's going to try to stay away from a lot of that and use a lot of the wrestling. And I think that's why Aldana, and get her up against the cage in the clinch situations, I think that's why Aldana came in overweight here. I think it was purposefully done. Don't hate it. I mean, I think it's very unprofessional. I think certainly the UFC should talk to her. I think they should. I'm not saying, obviously these are grown women, grown men fighting in the UFC. You can't necessarily just go scold them, but I think someone should say, hey, you know what, you can't be doing this. But I do think it is somewhat smart in this fight that she's going to try to do that. And it could allow her to have some success here, but I'm going to go Yana Kunitskaya, I'll say by decision in this one over Irene Aldana. Sean O'Malley, Chris Matino, easiest fight to predict on the card. It's going to be a knockout. Watch, Chris Matino will go out there and sub Sean O'Malley with a guillotine choke in like 10 seconds now, or something crazy will happen. Jorge Masvidal flying knee Sean O'Malley. No, Sean O'Malley should win this fight easily. It's going to be my knockout. He's going to be gunning for that bonus. I believe they're giving away $75,000 bonuses again tonight, I believe. Whatever it is, even if it is a 50, I think it's a 75 tonight, though. Sean O'Malley's going to be gunning for it. I think he already put that out there on Twitter. He knows he's got a severely outmatched opponent. He's got to get him out of there early. Might as well make it a performance bonus. So I think Sean O'Malley gets him out of there within 2 or 3 minutes. Knockout. Chris Matino doesn't take his head off the line very well. I think he's going to eat something nasty from Sean O'Malley and go out in this fight. So Sean O'Malley by knockout in that one. The prelims, also very good on this card. Carlos Condit, Max Griffin. I'm going to go Max Griffin in that one. Condit, saying this week he's going to throw down in the center of the octagon. He's probably going to try to do that. That's what Condit always is in entertaining fights. But he's just, he's been in wars over the years. He's taken damage. He's not the same fighter anymore. Max Griffin, I think, is going to have his day here. I think he does maybe even find the finish here, dare I say, against Carlos Condit, maybe TKO, something like that. But I think it's going to be a very fun fight. I think it should be a very entertaining fight. I think Condit knows he's got to stay entertaining if he wants to stay relevant, especially if he's going to lose some of these matchups. And I think it'll be entertaining, but I think Max Griffin gets the job done there. Nico Price versus Michel Pereira, people's main event tonight. If Pereira, especially if Pereira comes out and he uses some different strategy here of being more within himself like he has. The last one or two fights, he's been more within himself. He's not doing the crazy backflips, running off the cage. Michel Pereira has been more within himself, especially the Chaos Williams fight. And that's smart. I think Michel Pereira realizes, if I'm going to be an actual prize fighter, and as I climb the rankings here, as I climb, the competitive pecking order, against guys like Nico Price, against guys like Chaos Williams who can melt you with one shot, especially Nico Price, got hands of God. I mean, he sends you to a shadow realm. Whatever's beyond the shadow realm, that's where Nico Price sends guys to, especially even off his back, he'll do it. I think Michel Pereira realizes that, so I think he'll try to stay more within himself in this fight again. But I do think this will be an entertaining one. I think it'll be a fun one. I see a lot of Michel Pereira can use a little bit of wrestling. I see a lot of this being a striking battle, though, and I see Michel Pereira being able to probably outpoint Nico Price here, if not find a finish on him, if he can land something nasty. Now, Nico Price, the power is always going to be the game changer. That Michel Pereira could be winning 5 minutes of this fight, 3 minutes of this fight, 1 minute of this fight, however long the fight's into, and then Nico Price could land that one shot and send him to the shadow realm. He could melt him with one shot, could Nico Price. That's always going to be the game changer here. And Nico Price, I've actually liked Nico Price a lot over the years. He's looking really in shape, but so is Michel Pereira. And Pereira, the fact that he is staying more within himself, it makes me think that he can appoint a guy like Nico Price. Now, Price is going to want to come forward. I think he's going to want to make this, though. Nico Price would love if Michel Pereira turned into the old Michel Pereira tonight and was doing backflips and run off the cage. Nico Price would love that. He wants to make this a brawl. He doesn't want to make this a technical battle, although I do think Nico Price has some technical skills that if it becomes a technical striking battle, he can have some success there as well. But overall, I think that it's going to be more of a technical battle, which Nico Price doesn't want. I think he's going to try to make it, but I think Michel Pereira might stay within himself again. I think Michel Pereira probably outpoints Nico Price on tonight's UFC 264 card. Ryan Hall versus Ilia Topuria. I lied, actually. Nico Price, Michel Pereira might be the people's main event, but so might Ryan Hall versus Ilia Topuria. You have Ryan Hall, who's going to try to use his Imanari rolls, has some decent striking, but mostly going to try to use those Imanari rolls, try to use that grappling, that I won't say unorthodox grappling, because we've seen Tony Ferguson and other guys do it, but someone who does the unorthodox things very, very well at a high level. We're going to see all that from Ryan Hall, but then Ilia Topuria on the other side, also a very slick grappler, also has some dangerous hands in his striking. That's why I'm going to pick Topuria here. I'm very high on Topuria. I think he's got an overall game that will give a lot of guys issues, and I think it'll give Ryan Hall a lot of issues here. That, Ryan Hall, is he unorthodox in a lot of things he does? Is he a wizard on the ground at times, especially with that lower half, getting those lower half submissions, Imanari rolling guys? Yes, but Ilia Topuria, he's been there. He's got good striking. He's got good grappling. I think he's going to be wise to a lot of this, and I think he's going to be able to stay away from a lot of that, and I think he might just use his striking here and make it a striking battle and try to pick Ryan Hall apart. If not, maybe even use some more of his own grappling. Although if you're, anytime you're on the ground with Ryan Hall, it's going to be danger to you. So if I was Topuria, my game plan might be, obviously keep this a striking battle. Although Ryan Hall can strike and then Imanari roll you, so maybe you do want to go to the ground. That's why this fight is very interesting to me. But I'll take Ilia Topuria here, and I'll say he gets the finish actually over Ryan Hall. I think he actually finds a knockout or something in this fight to finish Ryan Hall. But at their end, I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Hall won this one either, and I wouldn't be surprised if it went to decision. But I'm going to take Ilia Topuria here. in that one. I'll say again by knockout at some point, maybe even late in the fight. Trevin Giles versus Dricus Duplessis. I'm actually gonna go slight upset here. I'm gonna go Trevin Giles. He's plus 100 underdog. So slight underdog, but I'm gonna take Trevin Giles in this one. I like his wrestling. If he can just make this a wrestling battle, right? Use some of his striking when he can. Keep this fight on the mat. I think he's gonna have some success here. Although this is a good matchup. I mean, Plessis very good himself in a lot of areas of his game. I'm going to go Trevin Giles, though there. And I'm going to run through these next ones a little quicker here just so I can get out of here. It's about to be an hour in. But Trevin Giles, I'll take him in that one over Duplessis. Jennifer Maia, Jessica Eye, I'll take Jennifer Maia. I think she's a very talented fighter. She gave even Valentina Shevchenko, although Shevchenko was coming off of, I think, a little bit of ring rust, if you will, a little bit of rust coming off of an injury. I do think Jennifer Maia is a talented fighter. Jessica Eye, I don't know where her career is headed right now. I'm going to go Jennifer Maia in that one. Amore Akhmedov taking on Brad Tavares. I'll take Brad Tavares in that one. Although Akhmedov has some parts of his game that I think Brad Tavares should worry about a little bit, but I'm going to go Brad Tavares in that one. Zalgas Zumagulov taking on Jerome Rivera. I'll go Zumagulov in that one. I'll say he gets the win over Jerome Rivera. And then Hu Yazong taking on Alan Amedovsky, excuse me. I'm going to take Amedovsky in that one over Yazong in that opening prelim contest. But overall, a really good, really great UFC 264 card. Very excited about it. Top to bottom, some prospects, some talented fighters. Obviously, the main event, which I didn't even get into, the McGregor-Poirier storyline, that whoever wins this is going to fight Charles Oliveira for the title. Title eliminator here between Poirier and McGregor in the trilogy fight. Conor McGregor having a lot on the line here. If he loses, yeah, he might get that Nate Diaz trilogy. Yeah, he might get a Michael Chandler fight. Yeah, he might get a Justin Gaethje matchup. There's all these matchups out there. Dan Hooker is still out there. But this fight's going to really be the difference between him being in a lot of big-time fights and actually maybe even being a champion again, compared to probably just having some interesting matchups, in my opinion. Because I do think if Conor McGregor loses, well, I think Poirier's talented enough where he could still beat McGregor, even if McGregor shows up and is at a high level tonight. But I think there's a lot of scenarios where if McGregor loses this, it's because he didn't show up again, and he's just, he's fallen off a little bit. His game has. So I think this is a big matchup. I think this is a big moment for Conor McGregor tonight, and for Dustin Poirier. Similar thing there, where Poirier, big money, big fight for him. And if he loses here, people are going to say, hey, that was kind of a one-off, right? Like, hey, maybe Dustin Poirier, if they fight 100 times, maybe, 50 times, whatever it is, maybe he wins a bunch of them, handful of them, but Conor McGregor probably wins most of the time, right? That's what people are going to be saying if Poirier loses. So Poirier's got some pressure tonight to show, again, this wasn't a fluke, that he is the better fighter here, that he is becoming a great fighter. He's moving from a very good fighter, even though I think he's borderline great, to a great fighter. So Dustin Poirier's got that on the line tonight, and the title hanging over that main event. Should be a lot of fun on UFC 264. I hope you enjoyed the episode today, episode 101 of the podcast. I'm going to have to get used to those triple digits now, saying those triple digits, as we are in the hundreds now. But episode 101 of the Man in the Cage podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the fights tonight. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Man in the Cage Pod. Again, go to the website, maninthecagemmma.show. Everything up there, about page. A bunch of links to all the videos, all that stuff, and sponsors. Again, if you're interested in becoming a sponsor on the show, love all my sponsors right now. Bovada, use my link bit.ly/themanintthecage, bit.ly/themanintthecage. Also, DBK Media handles a lot of my video content, a lot of my content going out. Go check them out online at dbkmedia.co. Follow them on Twitter and on Instagram at dbkmedia. You want to go check them out. They are the digital marketing agency, guys. But if you're interested in joining and becoming a sponsor, go to the website, maninthecagemmma.show, hit the sponsors tab, and there's a button on that page where you can sign up. You'll send me an email. You'll send the team over here, the Man in the Cage team, an email saying you want to sign up. We'll get you hooked up. So go check that out over on the website, maninthecagemmma.show. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel. A lot of you already here on the YouTube channel, but subscribe to it, Man in the Cage, MMA and Combat Sports Podcast. And then follow and subscribe on all the audio channels, Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That way you get the latest notifications on all of those as well. Again, enjoy all the fights tonight. I'm very excited about it, especially the main event. If I had to pick another fight where I'm like, hey, this one's going to be also, I think, fight of the night, I'll go to Poirier Hall. I think Pereira Price could end up being a technical striking battle and let down a little bit. I'm going to go to Poirier Hall, though. I think that could be a very good fight, one that you should watch out for tonight as well, along with all these other fantastic fights. And performance bonus-wise, I think whoever wins McGregor or Poirier, I think they'll get a performance bonus, especially if it's flashy, of course. They might even get fight of the night. I think that could be a performance bonus fight. I think O'Malley's going to get a performance bonus. And then, honestly, I could see Stephen Thompson, if he knocks out Gilbert Burns, I could see him getting a performance of the night bonus. On the other side, if Gilbert Burns knocks out Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, does something there, I could see him getting one as well. So a bunch of great fights tonight. I'm looking forward to it. I'll be tweeting out. I'll be following all these fights on Twitter. So follow me again at Man in the Cage Pod. Enjoy all the fights coming up tonight. And then I'll talk to you later on Monday or Tuesday next week as we get actually towards Bellator 262. We'll talk about that next week, though, and also recap everything on episode 102 of the Man in the Cage podcast. I'll release that later coming up next week. So until I talk to you then, though, go check out episode 100 of the podcast. Celebrated it with my friend Mark Anthony Sommelier. Mark Anthony, we MMA and wine paired with UFC 264. So go check that out as well. And then I'll talk to you next week. But until then, I'll talk to everybody later.